Hello and welcome to the Zero Hanger TV mailbag, where we answer your questions. Don't forget, if you'd like to submit a question or a hot take or a talking point, you can do so through our social media. Welcome back to the channel, Mitch. You've had a couple of days off. Yeah, from the YouTube channel. So we'll get straight into it. So we had a lot of questions. A lot of people come in and ask about Ben McKay, Josh Archer, Zave, AJ Cole and Pezza. So what's the latest on Ben McKay?
Well, yeah, a lot of reports came out this week that it's actually just down to 2 clubs, and a lot of people actually have no idea which way it's leaning. A lot of these kind of players, especially a big name free agent, you'd usually get some sort of indication on a favoured club or a club that's leading the race for most of the season, but it hasn't really been the case. Essendon have always been interested. Port Adelaide and Sydney have been interested, and Hawthorn have been more of a late suitor for him. But it seems like it will be the Hawks or the Bombers that he lands out. Could still stay at North if they match a bid and a rival club isn't willing to trade for him. But all signs kind of indicate that he'll be probably at Hawthorn or Essendon. And if I was to tip any, it'd probably be Hawthorn. Sounds like just about a decent enough offer might come across the table for him, which would mean that the Roos would get Band 1 compensation if that's the case, and that would mean that they get pick 3 on top of their pick 2 selection and everyone else falls back a spot. So that'd be great, I think, for North Melbourne. I think that's what they're keen on, as valuable as Ben McKay is to them. They'll certainly be taking pick 3 as compensation, and a club like Hawthorn or Essendon, who are both in need of key defensive options, will get a pretty valuable new defender to whack into their back line. So as far as the latest, it's down to about 2 clubs, but it's really quite an open race between those 2 and the Roos.
Yep, interesting. So, I mean, it's all the possibility that he stays at North, and also he might not even know where he wants to go at this point.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's very much up in the air. No, like I said before, no clear indication. Unlikely he's at North, but you can't rule that out if they're willing to match a bid, and then all of a sudden maybe the buyer isn't that keen on trading for him. So that's the benefit that these clubs are showing interest in McKay, because they don't have to trade for him necessarily. He is a restricted free agent, though, so that gives North Melbourne the power to match a rival bid and then force a trade, a bit like what GWS did a few years ago when Jeremy Cameron sent it off to Geelong, forced the Cats to hand over a few top 20 selections, and even the Giants have been through a few second-round picks. The Cats' way to get the deal done, but not just losing him for nothing.
Yep. All right, should be an interesting one. All right, so next question comes in from Austin Hocking. Why is no one talking about Mitch Hinge? And I'll be honest, I don't know who Mitch Hinge is, so that's why I'm not talking about him.
No, interesting question and timing. From an off-season perspective, probably not much to discuss for Mitch Hinge. Adelaide will be wrapped with his 2023 season, though, and if that's the question that's being raised in kind of year he had, he was absolutely fantastic for them in that can play wing, halfback, a taller option, or plays taller than what he can in defence. He was absolutely fantastic for the Crows this year. Earned himself a 1-year deal, so he's contracted for 2024. And I think he'll be a pretty strong finisher in their best and fairest count. So if that's what Austin's getting at, then yeah, maybe some more people could be talking about Mitch Hinge.
Yep. Shot fired. So next one from Will Oliver. Could Tom Lynch find his way to Melbourne? I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah, no, not happening.
Yeah, okay.
There's one club that probably needs a key forward more than Melbourne. It's Richmond to support Tom Lynch. They lose Jack Riel to retirement. They don't have a second key forward on their list. I don't see it happening.
Straight up, no. Next question comes from Jacob Kalsh. Will Travis Boak sign on?
This is an interesting one. First wave of delistings already done for Port Adelaide. Boak not one of them. I think that they would like to see him go out on his own terms. And that sounds like that's what the case is going to be. A few reports, I think, have suggested that he'll have the option to decide whether he plays on, which I think will be an 18th season at Alberton. So if it's up to him, from what he's said all year, he's pretty keen to play on in 2024. And I guess that kind of points to maybe a 1-year deal coming his way. Just the onus will be on him to really be fighting for his spot like he did in the back half of this year. Certainly no guarantee that he's a best 22 player anymore, and that they'll be prioritising other players if need be. So he'll have to weigh up whether he wants to stay at Port Adelaide, and it sounds like he does want to, but he'll know that comes with no guarantee of a starting spot. But I'd be assuming he's there next year.
Yeah, but if you were to go to a more developing club like a North or something, he would be like a Luke Hodge type to sort of just bring in that experience.
Great value and experience from what he brings, and in that regard, very much like a Luke Hodge role. Whether it be to a contending club is one thing, or whether he would be doing it at a younger club like the Lions were when Hodge was there, and maybe even trying to steer them into finals. It'd be a pretty tough one. He's from, I think, Torquay, Anglesey. The Cats tried to get him almost a decade ago, but I don't think he's exactly what they need. But yeah, maybe a side like North. If the Power are trying to get Zerk Thatcher, Radigalia, Jordan Sweet, one of those 3 clubs in the Cats, Essendon, or the Dogs, ask about Boak. Unsure if they're the 3 clubs that would best suit. Maybe the Bombers out of those 3. But like I said, I'd be shocked if he's playing anywhere that isn't Port Adelaide, or if he just calls time in his career. Might be more likely.
Yep. All right, so next one is a bit more of a hot take. So it comes from Billy Black, and the Bombers are to make the 8 next year.
You could certainly argue they could have made it this year. You're shaking your head. Yeah, I think if they get another year out of a couple of these younger guys, they certainly could be in a great position. They've managed to retain Mason Redmond, Darcy Parish. If they get someone like a Ben McKay in, then that's certainly going to help. But they also lose Brandon Zerk Thatcher. So, I feel like they'll balance. They should only be better than what they were this year. It's just about some of the other clubs that maybe are outside the 8 this season that could also be moving in. I think Freo should be coming back into the 8 in 12 months' time. Look at Gold Coast and under Damien Hardwick, what they're going to do. So I might have the Bombers in my 8. I'm trying to figure out who's going to fall out from this year's 8 as well. It was a really tight finals race, and even Bombers being among the clubs that didn't quite make it. You look at an Adelaide as well. It's going to be very tough for the top 8 spot in 2024.
Yeah, it's a bit of an early crowd, but I think there's just a couple of teams that are ahead of them in that sort of middle chasing pack. So next one is a question from Sam Palmer. Will Nick Daicos still win the Brownlow?
I would have him 1 or 2. Finished, I think, about 3rd or 4th in our MVP at the end, and that was because of injury. But kind of looking at the trend in his votes, when he did poll in our MVP, he polled quite highly, which means that if you're among the top, I think you're getting if about a dozen or more votes in our MVP in a game, then you're probably a good chance to be going 1, 2, or 3 votes in the Brownlow. So he did that really well, and that's probably one trend that works in favour of the Brownlow compared to our MVP race. Marcus Bontempelli, who's probably the player I'd be tipping for the Brownlow, and will likely overtake Nick Daicos after round 21 when obviously he hurt his knee, and Bont had a couple of stronger games towards the end of the season. And our MVP has predicted the Brownlow the last 2 years, in the 2 years that we've done it. So if you're following that trend as well, all signs point to Bont. But I think Nick will poll in fewer games, but might poll more votes in those 2s or 3s. And maybe even, I think so, there's 1s or 2s, and he'll get a few 3s on the way, obviously. So it'll be close. I would be putting my money on the Bont, though.
Yeah, me too. I don't think he's dropping any further than... He'd be top 5, surely. Yeah. All right, so next one comes from... This one's a bit of a hot take. So from Clan McLeod, Dodoro must leave Essendon immediately.
Immediately, I understand where these kind of calls come from. He's been there so long, and obviously from a finals results, it hasn't turned there and when you're pointing at the one figure that's been there for 20 years, then that can be some area where, whether it's a Bombers fan or not, is throwing some anger towards when they want change. They've undergone great change this season, and Dodoro will be the next one. Immediately is probably harsh. When you hit an off-season, you want your list manager there until the end of the off-season. I don't think you want to be cutting him now right on the eve of the draft and trade period. Get Matt Rosa in, get his hands dirty in his first off-season trade window and draft space, but have someone like Adrian Dodoro there who's been kind of following the whole season and the talent this season, both from an AFL perspective and a draft perspective all year long. Matty Rose has been over, I think, in Peel Thunder, so he's not necessarily AFL focused this season and more waffle focused. So I think Dodoro, smart handover, have him working with Rosa over the next couple months, and then once the draft is done, he's going to be easing out. That's not necessarily he's gone, but yeah, he'll be doing a lot less from 2024 onwards.
Yep. All right, so next one, it comes from Buzz. So who should win Coach of the Year?
Yeah, there's a few good options this year. My tip would be Adam Kingsley. I think you take a club who finished bottom 3 last year and lose 2 very good midfielders. You come in, I think your side's sitting bottom 4 or 5 with 8 rounds to go, 9 rounds to go. The list that he had, I don't think I had them outside of above the bottom 5 this year. To now be in a prelim and potentially a grand final, or potentially even go further and win a grand final is Herculean effort from a first-year coach as well. I guess some of the other names, Michael Voss is one. had a pretty tough season. Whether that is blamed is whether that's Voss himself or the players is another thing. But fantastic to get his side potentially into a grand final. And then on top of that, I think Craig McRae just steering one club atop the competition almost all year. And if he goes the distance as well, he'll certainly be a good shout. But I'd be having Adam Kingsley.
Yeah, sure. Me too. It is a bit of a weird argument when it's the top coach of their team has been good the entire year. Like they probably should get it, but to overcome the adversity in terms of what Michael Voss and Adam Kingsley have done, that's a pretty good argument there as well. But for sure. Adam Kingsley as well. All right, so the next one comes from Caspar G. What's the latest on Buku Khamis?
Not too much. He's still unsigned. Dogs have delisted a few players, but he's not one of them. I think he'd be required for them. Could be a trade option though. Didn't really play all too much this year or last year. Can play backline, can play forward. I think mostly forward in the VFL this season. So there might be a few clubs that are interested in his versatility. I think AFL.com had him linked to Collingwood and North Melbourne. So I'm not sure what the Pies would have planned for him. Maybe just as a depth forward option. North Melbourne could certainly have a role player at either end of their field at the moment that has some experience. So some clubs are said to be interested. Certainly could stay at the Western Bulldogs, I think. But currently still no contract for 2024. Yep.
Next question from Brady Booth. Is Dion Prestia going to the Gold Coast?
Yeah, I don't think he'll. Doesn't sound like it. There was, I think, some talk from Essendon a little bit ago about him potentially wanting to move back to Queensland. Nothing's really been said, and nor was that necessarily flagging that any move of such would happen this year. I think he's off contract next season, so if there's any move, it's more likely to come next year, but nothing's happening over the next few months.
And next one from Peter Villan. How can the Eagles get Gold Coast pick 4?
Without giving up pick 1, it's going to be pretty tough. I guess if they wanted to pair maybe their future first round selection and then maybe add in their starting pick for round 2 this year, that might get them pick 4. Obviously, their future first round selection though is most likely going to be a top 4 pick next year. I don't think they're really one. Obviously, they'd love more top selections, but they're not really going to be able to do that unless they're giving up their first round pick this year or their first round pick next year, which both could be pick 1 selections. And then you also have to, if they're wanting another top 5 or something pick, then it's going to be probably costing them a player. So the best way to get pick 4 is maybe splitting pick 1, and that's not only getting your pick 4. You can certainly get a number of other earlier selections, but you're very unlikely they'll be having 1 and 4 at the draft unless they're trading away their future first, which again could be pick 1 next year. In what is a very strong midfield group, and I think that's something that they'll be focusing on next year is adding to that midfield through the draft. And obviously this year's focus will be on either taking pick 1 and taking Harley Reid, or splitting it and getting multiple selections. So West Coast probably not the most favoured club to get pick 4, I would have thought.
Yep. All right, and next one is a take from Bradiella. Essendon was harsh delisting Rhett Montgomerie.
I didn't play a game this year. Only 1 year at the club. Came over from Central Districts, and I thought it was a bit of a surprise to get the chop. Obviously, Essendon's list management know much more than what everyone else does when it comes to the demographic of their list and what they want, and obviously getting close-up looks at these kind of players. But with uncertainty around Brandon Zerk-Thatcher, with kind of Ben McKay not necessarily going to the club, with Zach Reid facing injury battles, and with Nick Cox probably not best positioned to be a key defender, I'm pretty surprised they got rid of Rhett Montgomerie. Good intercept player, wins plenty of his own ball as an intercept option. Not a bad ball user either, and had some really good VFL performances this year. So, like I said, list managers at Essendon would know more about him and get a closer look at him. But I probably have to agree with that take. A bit of a surprising list call. 12 months on from when they picked him up in the rookie draft.
Yeah, could you see him on a list next year?
Adelaide maybe. He came over from SA. The Crows probably want some key defensive depth. Just after losing Nick Murray to an ACL, and they've got Tom Duday to an ACL as well for the first half of next year. So, yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure if they really go that way. James Borlase is there, Jordan Butts is there. They might have interest in a ready-made, experienced player. And he was a mature age recruit for the Bombers. It's not like he was a draftee coming out as a teenager. So, if I was picking anyone, maybe the Adelaide Crows.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, and last one, another take from Bridie. So Melbourne's depth will be tested if they lose both Jordon and Harmes this offseason.
Yeah, probably not a bad call. I don't think they would like to lose both of them. Jordan's a free agent, so it's not really their call to say whether he gets to stay or go. And then on top of that, James Harmes is contracted, but maybe considering options elsewhere. But you're right. I think both those guys, while they're not certain starters in their top senior side, they lose Luke Dunstan to an ACL and then retirement, so that's further depth out the window. And they don't really have all that much, I think, in that next line at VFL level. So those three were really big for them in the VFL this year. For Casey, maybe obviously they'll go to the draft and they'll have a good draft hand and could pick up some midfield options. But I think she's right. I think if you're losing both on top of Luke Dunstan as well, you're not really left with too many options in their midfield. Maybe a Bailey Laurie gets run through there.
Woden, probably.
Yeah, Woden's another one, exactly. But I think you want to keep someone with a bit more experience if Oliver misses another 12 rounds, or if Petrarca gets injured, or even a Tom Sparrow, Jack Finey, just one of these guys falls out. You want someone ready and waiting right there. And I think one of those two are very, very good depth options. But you can understand why, at the same time, they would be wanting to look elsewhere, given there's probably opportunities at another club that could see them play a full season in 2024.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, that wraps it up for the mailbag for this week. Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, Phoenix.
Don't forget, if you would like to submit a question or a hot take or a talking point, you can do so on our socials, and you can catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com.